Your hometown station, Carl Goldman with you this Tuesday morning as we close out the month of January. We're going to be doing a special broadcast right now on a subject that we rarely talk about on the radio, and we certainly don't publicize this, and that's suicide. For those who haven't been looking at the news lately, we lost one of our community leaders last week, Jim Howard, who's the executive director of the family ministry at Real Life Church, to suicide. And we rarely hear about that because suicide is something that's been a stigma that we don't usually talk about. In fact, it's been Devin Miller, who's here with me from our KHTS newsroom. It's been a policy of KHTS, and I believe the Signal newspaper also has that same policy, not to publicize suicides in the news. When we hear about a suicide, we respect the family and respect the privacy and do not publicize it. But in the past year, we've had a number of suicides here in Santa Clarita with community leaders. And when we learned about the one with Jim Howard at Real Life Church, we reached out to Real Life, and they immediately said, by all means, let's publicize this and let's bring it out in the open, which is a very courageous step. And I'm pleased to have the lead pastor of Real Life Church here, Rusty George, to talk about a subject that's not pleasant to talk about, but really, let's first of all, our condolences. Jim was an incredible guy. I knew him. Mm-hmm. We had many breakfasts together down the block, and I worked closely with him on the tribute, the candlelight vigil that we did with Real Life Church for the Vegas victims.
That's right.
We have smiled together many times at your annual Halloween.
Yes.
And first, so my first question is, why now? Why did you feel comfortable enough, and why did Jim's family feel comfortable enough about publicizing this?
You know, I think when something like this happens, it's so shocking that I think everybody's natural reaction is to say nothing. And I think even when you lose someone that's a fan or a friend or a family member who you care about deeply, and you lose them to suicide, you take it personal and you take the blame for it. Every person that I had to call in Kentucky, where he's from, they had the same reaction. I should have done something. I should have said something. We all feel this sense of shame and regret. And I think that makes us all just stop talking about it, when we really know that the way that we process things best is to talk about these things. And just having, here been in the community now for 15 years and seen the growing rate of suicide in our community, which some stats tell us we're one of the highest in the nation, and for it to be in this demographic of men between the ages of 40 and 55, that this is an epidemic we need to talk about. And we just felt that we needed to get out in front of this and let people know that this is something that happens to everybody. This is something that affects everybody. And there are people struggling behind their eyes with darkness or depression or sadness that not everybody can see. And the more we talk about it, the more lives we may save in the process.
And you mentioned the signs there. I spent a lot of time with Jim, but obviously not enough to see the signs. So I didn't see any of the signs. We would have breakfast together, and there was no indication. Yet I know in reading now some of the social media comments and some of your comments, he did talk about it every once in a while.
Mm-hmm. He did, and he would teach 3 or 4 times a year from our stage, and he's always a great communicator. And he would talk about bouts with depression or mental health issues. And in talking with some of his friends, I discovered that he was known to be on medication and then suddenly go off, which is not recommended. And so there were some things there that I didn't fully know about. Those of us closest to him didn't know about. He would make comments apparently to some, and we didn't really take them all that seriously because Jim was always joking and he was, fun-loving and all of that. And to look back on it, I mean, I think anytime you look back, hindsight's 20/20, you start piecing some things together, but you never really know what the darkness is behind that somebody's carrying. I was given a quote last night from somebody about be kind to people because you don't know the fights or the battles they're fighting. And the difficulty that all of us feel is we carry with us a certain amount of weight. And if on top of that, you have any kind of a mental health disorder or illness and you're on medication for it and go off of that, it makes it that much darker. And as we talked about this past weekend in our church, and we spent the whole service talking about it on our Sunday services, that medication is such a powerful thing. And I think in the Christian community, there's been this stigma of, well, I'm not going to take medication, I'm just going to pray it away. Well, sometimes God's answer to us is, okay, but also take your meds, because he's gifted great scientists and doctors with the ability to put together medication regimens to help us. So why wouldn't we do that? We'd go to the doctor if we have a headache or if we have a broken leg. And for many of us, we have kind of this brokenness in our brain with chemicals and whatnot that definitely needs some kind of medication to be on that is helpful. So all in all, we didn't know a lot of that. And Jim would talk about it periodically. We just didn't know all that was behind it. So for those out there that you're struggling with this and you feel like you can't talk about it, the best thing you can do is talk about it. Because as Brene Brown says, shame loses its power in the light of vulnerability. You get that out there, and then suddenly you find help.
That's why I think having a dialogue that Real Life Church is doing, and we're starting this at KHTS, and the whole community needs to continue to have this dialogue. The city is also working on a film. In fact, Miles McNamara, who's just on the air here a few minutes ago, is part of that team working on a film on suicide that will be available to everyone here in Santa Clarita. KHTS Radio, it's 9:44. Carl Goldman with you here at your hometown station, and we're talking with Rusty George, the lead pastor of Real Life Church, Devin Miller from our news department, also in the studio, talking about the life of Jim Howard, who was the executive director of family ministry at Real Life Church and took his life late last week, shocking the community, but I think making lemonade out of lemons with this. We can communicate, talk about it, and let Jim's tragedy mean something for all of us, and hopefully save more lives. I know when we did the story and published it, we've never had a response like that. And it continues now to start that conversation. I think coming out in the open and making, moving that stigma one more step has become very, very powerful. So I appreciate what you and the church did in taking that step.
Yeah, we just, one of our core values at Real Life, it's in our name, is real. We just want to be authentic, and none of us are perfect. None of us have it all figured out, and all of us are susceptible to not just illnesses, but also, our shame and regret and guilt and all the stuff we carry around. That's why we feel like the hope in Jesus is the most powerful thing that we have to offer. And for some of us who've even put our trust in Jesus, when medication or depression takes over, sometimes it's hard to remember that truth. And so whatever we can do to help, we want to do that. So a few things that we offer in the way of resources. We have a ministry on Friday nights called Celebrate Recovery. It meets every Friday night, and they deal with any kind of hurts, habits, or hang-ups. I think the stigma when you attach recovery to it is that it's just based on drugs and alcohol, and it's not. It's any kind of thing that you're just carrying around you'd rather not have anymore. And that could be codependency, that could be wrestling with the stigma of depression or battling anxiety, all kinds of different things. But one of them is grief. And out of that, we have groups that deal with grief. We have a group that's starting up in February, a grief group that will last for several weeks. And then even on Wednesday night, we're opening up our doors at the church building here in Valencia, and we've got pastors there and counselors there if you want to come out and just talk with somebody, whether it's about Jim, whether it's about somebody you've lost, or whether it's about issues in your own life, we want to be there for you.
And now that this conversation has started, I've read stats where about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people, so in our community of about 200,000-300,000, that means about tens of thousands of people are struggling with mental health issues. Has anyone come forth, either spoken to you or anyone else in your congregation, and kind of started that conversation?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And that's, as Carl, you mentioned, if there's anything good that can come out of this, I think there will be a great number of lives that are saved because of just the openness that people are being with this. They're coming forward and saying, I was thinking of this, or these are my thoughts. I thought it was just me, and now I discover that it's bigger than me, and even pastors struggle with this, Christians struggle with this. How do we find help together? And a lot of that is telling ourselves the truth, letting God tell us the truth, and then telling the truth to each other.
The feedback I'm getting is that from what KHTS did in terms of publishing the story is, I'm glad you guys published it. You really did it in a tasteful way, and you started a conversation which was really, really powerful. So Devin, as one of our news directors, I've got a question for you, because it's been, as I mentioned earlier in this broadcast, it's been our policy in most publications, most news outlets have a policy of not publicizing suicides. Do you feel we should be having a dialogue about changing that policy?
So that's always been the policy, not only in our newsroom, but most newsrooms around the country, because we want to respect the privacy of the family. But I think in the instance with the pastor, he's touched so many lives, and it was so public where, in that instance, I think it was a good thing to publicize it, just to start that conversation. And I think going forward, it should really be a case-by-case basis, because this is something that we shouldn't stigmatize. This is something that we should talk about openly, and it's something that actually we're going to talk about in our newsroom today about going forward. What's our new policy?
Yeah, and I appreciate the sensitivity that you guys have had to that, and the Signal has had to that too. And we're just so grateful to be in a community where we can have such great partnership with KHTS and with the Signal. And obviously, when the news broke that there had been a tragedy, we recognize that in the age of social media, I mean, news will get out. So let's leverage this in a way to save other people's lives. And so we put together a statement. We took it to Jim's widow and ran it by her first and said, are you comfortable with this going out? So that's where it started for us. And she said, absolutely. I think she wanted to honor her husband, and I think she also wanted to save other people. We all were just so shocked by this. Others have got to be in that position as well. So if we can help, let's do it.
Yeah, if we could save a number of lives and continue the dialogue and bring it out into the open, then Jim's legacy will live on in a positive way.
That's right.
I want to thank you guys. Any further questions, Devin? Are you good?
I think I'm good.
Okay, we're complete.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. Website for Real Life Church.
Yeah, reallifechurch.org. Love to have you go there. We've got all kinds of resources. And we have a resource we handed out in paper form this past weekend, but we also have it digital as well through our website, through the app as well. And that is a handout for those who are contemplating suicide, and then also one for those who are dealing with somebody contemplating suicide. What are the questions you ask? What are the signs? How should you deal with this and talk about it? And for those who want to watch the message from this past weekend where we talked at length about it, you can go to our website as well.
Terrific. Rusty George, always a pleasure.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
We will bring you back again soon, and thank all of you for joining us, and love to hear feedback on this broadcast and on the communication that we continue to do. And our prayers and thoughts go out to Jim Howard's family and loved ones, and also to all of the community at Real Life Church. So Rusty George, lead pastor of Real Life Church, Devin Miller, Carl Goldman here on your hometown station, KHTS Radio.
Beautiful